Welcome, miniatures fans, to the all-new Three Grots in a Vox podcast. Every few weeks, Tony, John and myself will be discussing various topics from the world of general nerdery, miniatures and tabletop gaming, and so on. Each week, the show will consist of a few different parts. We hope you enjoy this show. If you have any feedback, please leave us a comment down below.
Thanks for being here, guys. Yeah, so each week, 3 parts. Part 1 is probably going to be focused fully on Warhammer 40,000. Part 2 is going to be our pile of glory, where we look at games, not just Games Workshop games, but all manner of miniature games. We talk about games that we've picked up, cool things that are maybe coming in the future. And then part 3 is Grots Go Deep. And this week, we're going to go deep in on army lists. We're talking a little bit more than normal around Warhammer 40k for this first episode. And for the background for anyone that's new here, so we're all Blood Angels fans, we're all Blood Angels players, and we met through my YouTube channel, the Blood Angels Commander, so if you are here from that, I would very much appreciate you being here. And as you know, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And in that war, we found each other. And now, yes, we're going to kick off week 1. Tony is always going to be on beer every week, so grab a beer, chill out with us, and let's open the floor as we talk about Warhammer 40,000 army list building. So how do we want to start this, Tony?
Well, this week is brought to you by the Whitfield Citravolt. We're not sponsored or anything. I'm just hoping that if I start talking about it, someone will.
Is that a local brewery or is that on the shelf in
Yeah,
Tesco's?
it is. It's up the road from here. So, yeah, I've spent too much money in there. You've got to stick local in these hard, tough times and drink the beer. So yeah, if anybody works in a brewery and wants to sponsor this, then they're more than welcome. We'll call it after you. It can be part 1.
Just send it all to Tony. That'll be the fun one.
It'll be good. So today we're going to be looking at army list building. That's a topic that everyone keeps asking about, and we get a lot of comments on the Blood Angels Commander channel and elsewhere about how you build a list. And we thought that today, to kick us all off, we should start with how we build lists. I think we're going to be focusing largely around probably Blood Angels to begin with, but that does not mean that these are not applicable to every army. Spoiler alert, there might be some more later. So let's start off by talking about kind of general army building techniques and things. So, Mark, let's start with you then. Have you got any kind of overall sort of structure that you use when you're starting to build a list?
Depends what I'm trying to do at the time. If I'm building a list for general play with friends one evening, then I'll do it one way. If I'm looking to go to a tournament, I'll do it another way. If I'm looking to just have a laugh for whatever reason, I'll do it another way entirely. Probably the most significant consideration I'll always take into account when I'm building a list is always going to be, do I have the bloody models? And how much time do I have to paint them? Are they painted already? And can I afford to buy the new ones and get them painted up in the time I've got before the tournament? So that's always a prime concern right there.
Does that mean that you don't just write the list and then panic that you haven't got the models and you need them next week for a tournament?
Very, very rarely. If I do that, then I tend to cancel out the tournament or something along those lines, because there's no way I'm going into something not being fully prepared to it. I absolutely hate that. It's a horrible fear that I have of being not fully prepared of going into something.
See, I quite enjoy the midnight before, desperately trying to finish painting the last model.
No,
3 coats, you know, or 3 colours.
It is not something I get along with, I must confess. I'm the sort of person who's printed out this lovely big list weeks ahead in advance, and I know exactly what I'm doing and what I've been painting towards the last 4 weeks, and I don't do it very quickly because I'm not a very quick painter, and I do all sorts of other crap in the week beforehand. But yeah, there we go.
I love how
you've gone.
I was going to say, first of all, Mark, I love how you've managed to print your faction logo on the back of the army list. That is so much higher quality than my army list coming out of Notepad or something. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the opposite. As much as occasionally, if I was going to do a fun list, I just throw something together and wouldn't even think about it for more than a few minutes, right? Like if it was, for example, if I want to play someone who's brand new at the hobby, like I would just look at what I've got handy and just throw something together, right? Like no synergies, just something so that they can have a game and they can enjoy themselves, right? Because if it's someone new to the hobby, you don't want to just wipe the floor with them. Where's the fun in that? They'll never come back. So quite often if I play someone new, I'm purposely not even looking at synergies. I actually got someone sent a list, I think, today in our Facebook group over in the Blood Angels Commander, and I guess stay tuned if you do enjoy this. There will be a 3 Grots and a Vox Facebook group before too long. But someone sent a list today, and to me it just felt like a mishmash of all of our different units. You know, like, I guess as a new player, maybe you have a lot of different units, you're excited to see them on the table, but I think once you get a little bit more experienced, before you even start your list, I think the first thing you need to think about is synergies, right? And potentially they've kind of removed Hero Hammer this edition. If anyone's not familiar with what Hero Hammer was, that was when the characters were so powerful you could almost hinge your entire list around really strong characters. Now the characters are very much force multipliers to a certain extent, right? You can still have some heroes that can do a lot of damage, but I think more so in 9th edition, especially if we're going to start with Blood Angels need to use our characters effectively to improve the rest of our armies. So that's probably where I would start, thinking about the synergies between the troops, the units, the characters, and then building it from there, right, Tony?
It's like there's different stages. I'm sorry, I know you said Tony.
No, it's fine.
I've got a thought in my head here, so sorry about that. There's like there's different stages that you go through of list building. When you're starting to collect 40k, then you do so with the models you get from a box, and then you'd look as to what units you could add into that to build up your army. Then as you get a bit further forward, you've played a few games, you start looking at tier lists and going, oh, what's the best unit that I can get for my army? And I'll bung a few of those in, bung a few of that in. And then later on, you've figured out what's the best unit for your list and what you like to play with and what you don't like to play with. You start looking at what the meta game is, what other people are running, what would be good against them, what sort of tricks you can throw in that you hadn't considered before. You take it to the next level, so to speak. And now, I'll shut up now. Please go ahead, Tony.
All right, so let's build on that a little bit. And let's say that we are coming in at square one and you've not got a big box of models. You're going to build a list. You know, you're going to go out, you're going to buy the models, you're going to play with the list. You've got some magic amount of time that means you can paint the models, or a big pile of cash you can pay somebody else to. And you're going to go out and you're going to, from scratch, build your new list. You know, you mentioned earlier about sort of a friendly game or a more competitive game. And that's going to have a little bit of an impact on that. So let's say we're in a kind of your local meta. So it's not competitive, but everybody knows it is really competitive because you're with all your mates and you want to win. But you're going to pretend that you're not just in it to win, even though you are definitely trying to win. So totally. How would we start that off? You know, where are you going to start?
John, you're not competitive in the slightest. How would you do it?
Yeah, I was going to say it's a very good question, isn't it? It's Again, I guess this comes back to a lot of new players. And I guess we're coming off the back. If anyone doesn't know, we just filmed an entire tier list, which I think was an 8-part series on the Blood Angels Commander channel, where we went through every unit and placed them from S to D, S being the best in class, D being the worst, right? So arguably you could start there, right? Like if you are a new player and you're getting into the hobby, you could look for a tier list for your specific army, and you could start buying the units there. But then I guess for me, it comes back to synergies, right? Because if you just go ahead and buy all the S tier models, how are they going to synergize on the battlefield? So, I mean, the one thing to probably move on to next is to actually think about scoring, right? Because scoring is going to be super important. And scoring, you can, in some of the maps, in some of the secondaries, you can actually score the points regardless of what your opponent does. I guess a good example of that one right now is retrieve Octarius data. If you have the right models in your list, then you can score pretty much maximum points every game on retrieve Octarius data with like 0 risk, right? So we've talked about this as well before, how we think that synergies and then moving into scoring, right? So you're going to need to include units that can score points, and then at the same time, when you start thinking about those units that can score points, start thinking about what synergizes with those units.
And when talking about scoring, you're thinking primaries on the one hand, where you get up to 45 points of primaries through the entire game. And then you're thinking your 3 secondaries on the other hand, where you can get 15 from each of those. And then that'll make your whole game up. And just to clarify, when we're talking scoring here, we're talking about using missions primarily from the GT 2021 Grand Tournament Pack, or whatever that will turn out to be, the latest version thereof in whatever year. If you're watching this in 5 years' time, more power to you. I mean, come on, but geez, I'd be impressed. So yeah, scoring, ultimately, I mean, this is something I harp on about a lot, and I get shouted down because a lot of Blood Angel fans like to charge with Red Thirst and kill things and slash and death and rah, 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 rah. But killing doesn't win you a game. Scoring points wins you the game. It's that simple. If you can score 90 points to your opponents, whatever they score, and it's less than yours, and you haven't killed a single model, you've still won. Possibly you haven't won the moral victory because you're Blood Angels and you meant to kill a few things, but depends how much you want to win, really.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I think that's even more possibly prevalent in 9th edition than it ever was, right?
Absolutely.
Where scoring and knowing your list and building for those is,
It's the hugest difference between any previous edition of Warhammer and 9th edition. There are a lot of tournaments that used to change the game so that it would make missions that would build towards this sort of thing. The biggest culprit for this would have been the ITC in the US, whose missions greatly influenced what the GT pack now is these days. But mostly it used to just be if you could shoot your opponent off the table, you win. And there's no real tactics in it. And I
think the changing to get rid of variable turn length has been a good one, personally. Yeah. I quite like that. I think it's made it a lot more tactical. So when you guys are writing your list, do you specifically pick units around specific secondary objectives? Or do you just sort of build something that can take on any old secondaries and then decide on those when you get to the game?
Depends what I'm trying to do. With the latest list that I've put together, and I'm currently in the middle of painting for a tournament taking place in a week's time, which is scarily close because I really haven't finished painting it all. I've built that around the specific premise of scoring trumps everything. I've chosen units specifically designed to score particular secondaries that are under my control rather than the opponent's control, so that I can reliably, hopefully, score them more often than not. And I've chosen units that can move out and take and hold objectives or dissuade the enemy from coming close to me. So that's one way in which you could choose to put the elements of your army together.
How about you, John? When you're writing your list, do you think about a specific secondary, or do you just build a generic list and worry about secondaries later?
No, at the moment, I think I'm with Mark here in that secondaries are super important. I definitely like the ability to score secondaries regardless of what your opponent does. And I think, you know me, I play Space Marines every game or Blood Angels every game, and I always take the Space Marine one. Or I want to say always, I just want to say 95% of the time, Oath of Moment, right? So if you're playing against me, you know that I will have a unit that is strong and durable and is probably going to head to the middle of the table. And like we already said, we're Killy Blood Angels, so if you want to challenge me in the middle of the table, I'm quite ready for it. So I think that, and I guess that's a good example of like a synergy, right? Because the way I'm running that at the moment is Blade Guard Veterans with Transhuman and then a Sanguinary Priest. So I am doing everything I can. I think we talked about this before. The Sanguinary Priest is the only model in the game that makes the unit more survivable. Blade Guard Veterans are already crazy survivable with their Storm Shields and their 3 wounds, and then they can be transhumaned. So having the Priest in there as well, giving them the 6-up shrug, means that this is a strong It's not even a big investment, right? 5 Blade Guard Veterans and a Priest, 250 points or something, and it's designed in my list. And I guess if Oath of Moment looked like a terrible secondary, it could do other things as well, right? Like it could hold a primary as well. So I guess like if you think about these before you even get to the tabletop and have a good reason to include the models, then I think that's probably where you want to start any army list, right? Obviously, I suppose we should talk a little bit about detachments, because detachments also have a big impact on what you're actually taking. Recently, we did a survey, and it was like 62% of players are still using battalion detachments. I think a small percent, maybe like 10%, were using double patrols, and the rest are using the patrol and vanguard. So then that comes down to how many CP are you willing to use, and how many troops are you willing to take? Because troops are
the balance that's right for you. That's the key part. Some people will want more CP, some people will want less, some people want something in the middle, and that balance you'll only discover from playing the game a few times, if not a load of times, to be honest.
Yeah, and
go on.
The last thing then is just, and I think the big question there is the troop choice, right? Because troops are the only units that are going to obsec objectives. So troops are still very important. Obsec can win or lose you games. And if you're not familiar with OBSEC, that means if you have a single troop unit on an objective, regardless of how many enemies they have, if they do not have the objective secured keyword, then you hold the objective. So even though maybe we are seeing a little bit of a stray away from battalions, troops are still, like if you are new and you just wanted to get started, I would probably recommend you look at a battalion, you look at 3 troop choices, and that will be the core of your list. Sorry, Tony, on you go.
So let's say we've decided what sort of secondaries we're looking for. We've decided sort of our structure, so whether we're going for a battalion or a dual patrol or something. What's the next thing we're going to look at? What do we need to be able to put in our list, or what do you guys think you need to be able to put in your list to make it a good one?
There is one more stage to consider in that, which is the kind of like the ultimate in where you want to get to in list tweaking, in building your list to take on what you'd be facing to win. And very few people can do this effectively because it relies not only on the knowledge of your own army, but on everybody else's army, and keeping a finger on the pulse on what's winning, what's being played in your local meta, what's being played in general, and that literally is playing the meta game. One of the chaps who did extremely well at a recent event did so because he tailored his army specifically to be able to face and kill the big nasties of Admech, Drakari, Sisters of Battle, but he also paid very close attention to the terrain that had been publicized ahead of time when GW said we're going to allow and promote and place our terrain in these 2 different setups on every single game, so where you're going to be able to move your models to take advantage of this terrain here, to jump there. You can build your list in ways you might not normally do when you don't know what terrain you're going to be fighting on. And paying that attention to the meta game against the terrain you're going to be on, the armies you're going to be on, is like the pinnacle in things you want to be taking into account when you build your list. There's not much more to it than that. If you can do that, then you are playing at the top of 40k.
Okay, so Tony, what would you like to touch on next about list building then?
Well, I think one thing we haven't really discussed is what you put in your list. We've said that we're going to pay a lot of attention to the structure of it. We're going to pay a lot of attention to whether we're going to do secondaries or not. But what about areas that we're going to put in it? What models do we bring? Is it viable? Do I bring an orc horde of 200 orc boys? Is that going to let me win games? Can I win games if I bring nothing but Death Company? So I think we need to retouch on is, what do you need in your list? What models do you need to bring? What units?
Yeah, I mean, we are going to jump in section 3 to our current competitive lists, and I guess we will give a good rundown of them there. But yeah, I mean, in general then, I guess that is a good question, right? I touched on it a little bit about saying start with the battalion, bring some troop choices, and then I think the thing that I've been harping on a lot about in 9th edition, especially as a Blood Angels player, which is going to sound strange, I suppose, because Blood Angels like to be in combat, we like to kill things. I've been harping on a lot in 9th edition about bringing balance, and that means like you look at the list almost like, so you're going to have 300-400 points of troops because you need that in your battalion. So what are you going to do with your other, if you imagine it almost in quarters? So we're going to take 300-400 points of characters, we're going to take 300-400 points of heavy sport, we're going to take 300-400 points of melee, and maybe there's one other quarter in there as well that you're going to use for objectives. But I think, for me personally, I really like balanced lists. Now, that doesn't work with every army, obviously. But I think if you are playing Space Marines, then I think regardless of what chapter you are, I probably would still be tempted to say, look at a bit of balance. Because I play Andrew, and you guys know Andrew from my live games. Andrew likes to go all in on what is best. We had a few weeks ago, we had, 17 mortifiers on a list, and as strong as mortifiers are, even though I did lose that game, I think when you just look at one unit and you say, this is the best in class unit, I can take 10 of them, 20 of them in my list, that is all I'm going to take. I think you pigeonhole your something terribly.
Okay.
So I stress balance so much so in all the lists that I build personally.
It's kind of a key point in the concept of a build an all-comers list, or a take all-comers, or TAC as they're sometimes abbreviated to. You want to be able to fight any opponent that comes your way, not just ones that you're good against or that your army's bad against. If you get into a tournament, and you need to literally be able to face anything.
Yeah, so you definitely want to. I think you definitely want a semblance of balance in your list, unless maybe like you're an Imperial Guard player and you've got all tanks, and that's how your list works, you know?
Yeah, a skew list like God knows how many mortifiers or whatever will kill a lot of things. But let's say you're going to a tournament and you want to win, then you may kill 90% of the armies, but the 10% that you won't, they will kill the crap out of you really, really hard. There'll be a hard counter against it, and there's no way you're going to win every single match that you do. It's the sort of thing you face in Imperial Knights. They're really, really strong against some things, but against some things, they're really, really awful. And that's a kind of a principle of the game that you've got to face. That doesn't mean that you should always take a balanced list that has every element represented in every way, because by knowing those rules and understanding how they all work and play, you then know how to break them and what benefit you get from breaking those rules and playing into a particular strength, whether that will bring you a benefit that you wouldn't otherwise get from your list one way or the other. A lot of people seem to think you need to deal with a few different elements in order to build a take-all-comers list. You need to be able to kill hordes of crap, cheap, toughness 3, low save armies. You need to be able to kill elites, which have got a less model count, higher toughness, durability models. You want to have a way of killing tanks and high armor. You might want to have a way of killing flyers, but nobody really brings flyers at the moment, so that's a little bit less of a deal than it used to be. Tony, you're not saying a lot. Come on, say something, mate. Jump in.
Yeah, I've been playing a long time, and I've not really changed the way I've built armies since I used to play Warhammer Fantasy Battle so many years ago. And I tend to build my armies.
Trace.
I love movement trace. I rank and flank. I'm all over that. I've built armies exactly the same way since I used to play that, and I've always kind of built them around the idea of threes. And what I mean by that is I want to have in my army 3 ways of dealing with any scenario that I do. So I'm a little bit different to you guys in that I don't build armies generally with a specific secondary in mind. Now, I know that there are some very good arguments saying I'm going to build this army because I'm going to take this secondary. But what I try and do is build my army that I've got lots of options of secondaries that I could take. And then I'll look at the table and I'll look at the terrain and I'll look at my opponent and think, oh, you should take a knights. And then I'll work from that. So when I say my sort of armies of 3s, what I mean is I want to have 3 ways of dealing with any type of unit. You know, skew lists have always been good, and it is fun. I've done it. I've turned up with the Death Company army before and said everything in my army is going to charge, and I've gone full flesh terrors and gone for that. But a skew list, like you say, a skew list is brilliant against normal army, but it's going to lose if it fights another skew list that just happens to be in the area that it's weak. So what I want in my list is I want some way that I can kill loads of toughness 8. If I fight a knight's army, how am I going to cope? At the same time, I want to say, if I fight a orc horde, am I going to be able to cope? Flyers, can I shoot them down, or am I going to... It's not such a big thing now, but at the same time, You've seen some of those AdMech lists with all the Archaeocopters, and they're pretty nasty. And Eldar flyers are still a thing. They're not quite as bad as they were, but they are still a big thing. But the real big one is I'm thinking top meta armies. So I'm looking at there and I'm saying, all right, the AdMech are winning because they're running loads of those Iron Strider Ballastaris and big Skitari blobs. So if I'm matched up against them, how am I going to do? What have I got in my toolbox that can fight that? So back to my rule of 3 then, I almost split my army into 3 separate armies. I'm not thinking whole detachments, but I want to have in each one of those, sort of that third, I want to have some way that I'm going to deal with some big tanks. I want to have some way I'm going to deal with some hordes, and I want to have some way that I can deal with nasty characters or whatever. So what that means is that if someone kills off if I've spent all of my points and I've bought a Vindicator laser destroyer, whatever, and they've blown it up, I should still have at least 2 more ways of dealing with those toughness 8s. So I've not got all of my eggs in one basket. And that's why I'm such a huge fan of really cheap units. We've talked about it before with the Blood Angels, and I won't run the Chapter Master on the bike. And the reason I don't like running the Chapter Master on the bike is because he comes in at sort of 170 or so points, and I think that's too many for my 1 HQ. There are exceptions to that. Some of them are just so broken, Morgan Vale, that you just suck it up. But I really try and stick quite strongly to that rule of 3 and rule of I can take on these 3 lists until I run against 17 Mortifiers and go home crying. But
you've reminded me of another principle that I try and use, which has been a really, really hard lesson to learn over the years, and that is always go for more units than upgrades as a general rule. Unless one of the units you want to bring literally has to be brought with a specific upgrade to fulfill a particular concept in your list. For example, bringing in Inceptors and giving them plasma rather than bolters. If that's what you're bringing the Inceptors for, that's an essential upgrade. But as a general guidance, try not to upgrade your units with 5 points here, 10 points there, an extra Storm Bolter, an extra missile launcher, until you've got to the point at the end of your list where you've got a few points left and it's not enough to buy another unit with. You've got like 15, 20, 25 points, put 5 units here on an Inferno pistol there, 10 points on a rocket there, that sort of thing. That's when you should be doing upgrades, not just doing them willy-nilly throughout putting your list together, because that way your characters and your units tend to have a load of upgrades that they're not going to use most of the time. And if you'd strip them all away, you could have another unit or something claiming objectives, killing stuff, moving stuff around. And it's a problem that I find you tend to grow out of, I think.
Oh, I don't know about that. I find that I start to grow into it. I used to be really, really brutal. No, I won't take a Thunder Hammer because it's a Thunder Hammer going to give me more utility than another Intercessor. Whereas now I'm occasionally like, no, all the toys. I want the tank with 1,000 guns. And I know in my heart of hearts it's not as good as bringing 2 smaller tanks, or I could bring the super heavy.
Last time we talked, you wouldn't even put a damn Infernal pistol on your character. Like
4 Inferno pistols is another man.
And then you get people who math out the most optimal option to be doing with all of your stuff and then working it all out from there. We don't know anybody like that here in this channel, do we? No.
Okay, we're going to move on in just a second here. I just want to make one final point, and I think it's about deployment, and I think we could probably cover deployment in a future video. But we are going to revisit army lists in part 3. But in your little idea of having your 3 sections, Tony, do you actually deploy in 3 sections? Because I was kind of curious about that.
It depends a little bit on my opponent. So going back to fantasy battle days, and I know it doesn't sound outrageously relevant, but it can be, and I would have those units in that kind of synergy to support. So what I've actually got is 3 smaller armies that are self-sufficient and are able to support. And against certain matchups, I think that can be very, very handy. So rather than worrying about a single castle in the center, because you see this, where they've gone, I'm going to have this Death Star in the center of my army, and I'm going to walk it forward, and I'm going to kill absolutely everything in front. And it absolutely will. It'll be an unkillable doom blob in the center. But if all the objectives are around the outside and they've lost all the points, you've lost that. So I don't want to have that synergy of all of my units. I want to synergize a group of units that can work together and achieve an objective. Now, it might not be that my 3 armies are working independently. It might be that this group has got elements of all 3, but it's to do a job. So this is my taking the centre part. This is my going to go over there and kill his artillery slot. But they are able to work as a group to achieve an objective rather than having to rely on the whole army to do everything, because then it just gets a bit messy.
Okay,
it's a bit of a weird way of looking at it, but
you can think on the fly then as to what elements of what group you want to put where in which bit of the board or which bit of the deployment, whether you want to put bits in deep strike, whether you want to take them off, you look at your opponent.
It really depends on your opponent, because if you let's say we're fighting something like a shooty Tyrannid list, because you know you're going to fight Tyrannids, and the first thing that jumps to your head is he's going to bring 5 Carnifexes, his 2 Flying Hive Tyrants, and 1,000 Gene Stealers, and you rock up and he's brought a pure shooting list. Well, in which case then you need to be thinking, how am I going to bring the fight to my opponent? But at the same time, you might rock up and they've brought a pure melee army that you weren't expecting, and you think, well, there's no point in me trying to send off any units on their own to do a thing, because they're either going to get eaten alive or, even worse, eaten and then used as a leapfrogging post to come back to me. So you can't go in too rigid about that, because you're just going to screw yourself up.
All right, nice, thank you. Let's move on to section 2 then.
Yeah, I think it is about that time, isn't it? So section 2, pile of glory. I wanted to call it something offensive. John wouldn't let me. But glory pile is still a thing that I think we could leave to everyone's imagination. So there's going to be some sort of fancy swiping effect. And we'll be back with the not news. Or timely, not very timely intervention. I quite like that, but it was a bit of a mouthful. Shall we?
All right,
so intro to the pile of imminent glory.
Pile of imminent glory. That sounds like you need the toilet.
Well, I will need the toilet, but let me just say first that it would be great if my local brewery, Windswept, and this is a brewery off the north coast of Scotland, and as such, you would be very windswept if you were up there. They do lovely beers, and so tonight I'm drinking Aurora, which is a New Zealand pale ale.
So I visited one of John's local breweries, and I've got a bottle of Glenfiddich that has just run out, which is aggravating. But yeah,
I know that one. That's the whiskey that they put beer into or something, right?
Do they? I don't know.
That's why it's got IPA on the bottle. Oh no,
experiment. Yeah,
the whiskey is brewed in IPA casks. Right, we're totally off topic here, but I mean,
India Pale Ale.
Well, I think this is an important conversation. Mark's polished off a whole bottle of whiskey on the sly.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
John's having New Zealand beer from the north of Scotland. Mine's getting a bit dangerously low, so I'm going to have to get another bottle in a minute. I would ask my wife, but she would shoot me, and probably swear quite a lot. And then John's going to have loads of beeping out. We've already discussed this, John. If we have to swear and you have to beep it out, we want to use the Wilhelm scream. You know?
Okay, yeah, like
just to make editing harder. So
I can't foresee any of us saying anything that we would be ashamed actually having on air. Let's face it.
We're kid friendly. We're child friendly here.
Yeah. So anyway, the pile of glorious shame. Let's get into it. Where are we starting this week?
Shame. So, what have we been buying, playing, painting, boys? Mark?
I have not been buying anything because it's towards the tail end of the month and it's payday on Friday and I'm trying to save money because I'm pissing off on holiday in a month. So, I have been finished building a 2,000 point army. I'm getting to the point where I've finished base spraying it and inking it. And I've been doing all the bases and I've been getting to the point where I'm starting to do all the bolters and stuff for all of this army, which I had only, prior to designing this army 4 weeks ago and arguing about it on Discord with Reziel and a couple of other guys, quite a lot. There was a lot of arguing. It was not fun. That's a lie. It was fun. It was great.
You love it.
Really appreciate you guys doing it. It's been very helpful in me talking through what the thinking was with writing that list up. But anyway, moving on. Painting that shit up for the last 4 weeks has been what I've been supposed to be doing, and I've been doing it maybe one night in 3-ish. because I've been suffering from a cold and I tend to not have a lot of energy at the moment. So I need to get it done over the next week. Otherwise, I will be docked tournament points, and that would be bad. But I think at this point, I'll probably just suck it the fuck up. So there we go.
So what tournament?
So we've gone from family friendly to potty mouth in one segment.
Sorry, who was it who said get some drinks out there for the next one? Yeah? Who was it?
It's no fun drinking alone. Nobody wants to drink alone. So, Mark, that means you've actually made your pile of shame smaller.
I have. Yes, that's true. I've resisted buying the units that they were telling me to buy, and I have indeed made my pile of shame smaller. It's an impressive thing.
Blimey.
It's still effing huge. Let's face it. Christ, that could be one idea for a segment. We'll just go through a list of all of our piles of shames one month.
Oh, no, I couldn't do that because my wife might listen to it.
Oh, right.
She'll kill me. John, I know you bought the Warhammer Plus app. What do you think? Well, Warhammer Plus video thing.
Ooh, topical.
Ooh, it's controversial. I had so many problems getting it to work.
I've heard that from a lot of people, to be fair.
I tried to get it on my browser on my smart TV so I could watch it on the smart TV. No, I tried putting it on my phone and casting it to the smart TV. No, I ended up using my Steam link to get it to work on my smart TV, in that I opened Steam, linked, and then alt-tabbed into it on my computer. So
you found a use for the Steam link? Jesus, I bought one of those. I think I used it once, found it was rubbish, and put it back in the box.
Yeah,
I tried watching that one video, the preview they did the week before, on my smart TV downstairs, and I had to open up an in Samsung web browser and try and navigate with the remote and get it running. Oh god, it was such a...
I tried that last night, and
I couldn't get full screen to work on my computer. Why is there not a full screen button? Games Workshop, if you're listening, it's a little thing. It's got 4 arrows. You click it, goes full screen. It's fairly standard for watching videos. You click on it here and see us in full screen. Why can't I see you in full screen when I've played it?
betting it's there and you just missed it.
No, it's not there. You have to press F11 on your web browser and maximise your web browser.
I can't watch it on my telly because my telly's a Panasonic and doesn't watch it. I don't want to watch it on my phone because it's a phone.
It's a hobby. It's a great hobby. They make loads of stuff. But let's face it, who in their right mind could have possibly predicted GW might have flubbed a digital launch?
All right, so
never done that before.
Let's roll it back. Have you watched any of the content yet, John?
Yeah, I watched the new Blood Angels of Death. We got one episode last night. It was about 18 minutes long, which is a little longer than I was expecting. Probably 15 minutes. There's probably 3 minutes of credits, as with all these
If you
TV
spoil it,
shows.
I'm going to come up there and kill you.
Okay, well, I already have a video on my channel. If you want to spoil it, you could go watch it over there. But yeah, we won't spoil it. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it actually quite a lot. But the comments that I saw today where a lot of people were maybe saying that the animation wasn't as good as it could be, some of the voice acting and or sound effects weren't as good as they could be. But here's the thing, I was excited. I was ready to watch it. If you're excited about something, you can overlook minor flaws. So I thought it was very cool to finally see some of the things we've thought about for many years come to life. And you guys know that I'm not like the most lore guy in 40k, so for me personally, I enjoyed it, and apart from the technical issues aside, right now I feel that Warhammer Plus is very, very light on content, because I think there was 2 episodes, a couple of painting videos, but I mean, like, let's face it, if you're going to watch painting videos, I usually watch stuff like Midwinter Minis or Squidmar, they're already available, and then...
3 episodes of that Hammer and Bolter one, wasn't it? As well as the first episode of Angel's Death, if I recall correctly.
So important question, John. Was the Angels of Death better or worse than the Ultramarines movie? So on a scale of the Dawn of War original intro video,
yep,
and I Have Come to Destroy You,
yep,
all the way to Ultramarines, a Warhammer 40,000 movie, which I watched as a premiere in a Warhammer shop and thought was awesome. I've got the collector's edition of that. It's got a book. It's got a steel book.
I actually have a very... I didn't hate the Warhammer Ultramarines movie. I didn't hate it, but let me tell you why I didn't hate it. And there's a funny story about that. And the story actually involves Brett, who you know from my channel and Battle Reports. I went round to Brett's house and he told me, "Hey John, I've got a new Space Marine Ultramarines movie." And I was like, "Oh cool, let's watch it," you know? I'd like to see that. And he said, do you want a drink? As you do, you know, you have a friend over. And I said, yeah, I'll have a drink. What are we drinking? And he said, Jägermeister. And this was, when did this movie came out? Like 10 years ago now?
More than that.
Okay.
Because I was still at school, I think, and I'm about the same age as you guys. So
yeah, maybe 15 years, right?
Yeah.
Are you trying to say you enjoyed it because you were smashed off your face and didn't have any quality judgment?
Wait a second, though. So Brett hands me, get this, a pint of Jägermeister.
Jeez.
And I said to him, Brett, do you drink this in pints? And he was like, oh, yeah, you drink it in pints. You know how Brett's so a bit airy-fairy. And I was like, what percent is it? And I was like, he's like, I don't know, not much. And like, we look at the bottle and it's like 35%. And I was like, okay, I guess we're drinking
a whole bottle in a pint of that as well, near enough. You know?
So we didn't hate it because we both drank
There you
a
go.
pint of
There you go,
Jägermeister.
ladies and gentlemen. That's what it takes to enjoy the Ultramarines movie. You heard
It
it
was
here.
written by Dan Abnett, wasn't it?
I've no idea.
Yeah, it was. It was written by Dan Abnett, and it had some really good. It had, like, I think it was Sean Pertwee was in it, and a couple of Mark Strong, maybe. I don't know. I don't remember. I might be making it up, but I remember it had some really good people in it, and it was written by Dan Abnett, and we were super excited. I actually genuinely watched it the other day with my wife, who doesn't know anything about 40k and just can't see the point. So I sat there and watched it. And she's looking at me like I was some sort of mentalist. And I was like, isn't it great? She's like, no. It's fucking awful.
Absolute tosh.
Okay, so
come on, John. You haven't ranked it yet.
Okay,
Angels of Death,
we only
better
got
or worse
15
than the Ultramarines movie.
we only got 15 minutes of it. So it was just the setting the scene. I don't know, let's say a 7 or 8. It's hard to judge on 15 minutes, right? It was the extended trailer essentially. So will I watch more? Yes. Am I happy I subscribed? I think yes, because you know you get a model that's, if you take the Vindicator Assassin, I imagine that he's at least $25. You know, you get a £10 gift voucher as well. So really, you're only paying £15 at that point for the year. Me and Andrew did joke that the £10 gift voucher just lets you buy it from all the resellers at the same price that you get it off the Games Workshop website. But yeah,
You know, you're going to get so much hate in the comments that you've just said how you've shilled out and you've given the devil more of your hard-earned cash, because I bought it as well. I thought I'm already paying for the app because I don't mind the app. I quite like the way you can make army lists quickly, but when we do the army list bit later, I had to send a new army list because it was wrong because the app named everything wrong, which sounds about right. But the only thing I've watched on it was the battle report, and it might just be the fact that we spend so much time analysing lists and battle reports and stuff like that, and all I kept thinking is, that's a shit list fighting a shit list.
What was it? It was Ultramarines versus Necrons. If I
it was
remember
Ultramarines
correctly.
versus Necrons, but it had things like had 1,000 intercessors, which are okay as Ultramarines, a repulsor, which isn't. It was just, you know, it was Primaris only because it's Games Workshop, and you know they're going to want to push the new stuff.
I take it they wanted to use it more as a showcase for pretty models and pretty
I
paint
think
jobs.
so, yeah. It felt to me a little bit more like if you've got some sort of kid and you want to show them a game, and what they've written is they've written a new shiny Primaris only force against the new Necrons, and it's kind of like a showcase for kids. Whereas the stuff we watch might be a little bit more cutthroat or a little bit more flavorful, maybe. This was very, very intro game at your local store. And then I noticed a lot of the other content is just the stuff that used to be on YouTube. I think it might still be on YouTube, but they've just moved it across.
Yeah, I was going to say, I flicked
Citadel Masterclass.
I
know there's a new painting video that's more.
Sorry,
although they could have picked a blander thing to do it on.
You know what? I'm actually
first issue. Let's do pale skin on a Space Marine head.
I haven't subscribed to it yet.
Yep.
But I am intending to, because I also pay for the 40k app, and I don't use it for list building because, frankly, the list builder is shit. It shouldn't be. It's had a lot of months to fix all the bugs. It's had people reporting all the bugs, but you still find bugs here and there, and it's just annoying. Battle Scribe was a real bugger to work out how to use, but now that I know how to use it, it does everything really, really quite well, which is cool. I've got an AOS army. I've got Lumineth Realm Lords. One day I'll play an AOS game and I'll figure out how to use it, and getting the AOS app out of my sub for this will be useful. and the content that you'll get out of the Warhammer Plus will be worthwhile when you add it all together, and how much I'm paying, and the model, and the voucher, and all this sort of stuff. But what I was getting towards, the single thing in the contents that you get out of this, I'm most looking forward to doing and viewing and reading through, is the whole back catalogue thing they've done. Not of the source books, because I've either read them and I don't care. It's not really the back issues of White Dwarf, because
it's not as good as you think. Doesn't go back that far.
It's the Warhammer Visions issues.
Oh, Warhammer Visions is all in there. Yeah, that's there. That was worth a look.
Which was 30 issues of magazines when they split White Dwarf into marketing blurb ones and painting ones, and the painting ones are called Visions. And 30 issues of just gorgeous shots of models, well painted in atmospheric ways, showing off ideas and visuals. That really appeals to me. I'd love to go through all of those.
It was worth a look. To be honest, it's the main thing that I've done was poking through those, because they're old now, but they're still cool. Quality painting and cool models don't get any less quality or cool as time goes on. No. So buying things, I did buy the Warhammer Plus app. I also bought Hexfire because I'm a sucker, and I sat there at 2 minutes to 10, like click, 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 click.
Did you buy it because you're a Grey Knights fan or a Thousand Suns fan, or both? Or you're just
a bit of both, but also money? Because I'm a sucker.
There wasn't actually that much new Thousand Suns in the box, and
there wasn't new anything in the box. There was two new characters. You got Castellan Crow and the new Infernal Master,
and that was
the only new stuff in that box.
Yeah, just before we move on, let me just give my 2 cents on the battle report, because I film battle reports on YouTube, right? And I liked how edited it was, in that when they showed off the armies at the start, they had like all this. They had like a kind of a cool AR thing going on, where it was like it panned round like a bunch of intercessors, and like you saw this augmented reality, I guess would be the best way of saying it. Like a thing came down and like pointed at his gun, and it was like standard issue bolt rifle, etc. Right, and it was like almost like it was like viewed out of
production
like a
quality was
Terminator
really,
or something.
Really high.
Yeah, and like they did a lot of editing on it. Like if I had unlimited time to work on my battle reports and had 10 hours to edit every one, I liked all the editing. But I think that the thing that you missed one was what Tony said, which was the army lists were kind of I've been struggling for weeks now to get a good army list together, but any of my bad army lists would crush both armies that were on the table. And then the other thing that it felt pretty scripted. I like when we play and there's a bit of sass and there's a bit of joking around or a little bit of like back and forth. It just felt a little bit. I think you hit the nail on the head, Tony. Yeah, it's a bit more introductory friendly, which is probably not what I want to see. Right, like if I'm going to watch a battle report, I want to be seeing the best of the best. Yeah. Otherwise, why am I watching it? Because I'm not going to learn all that much.
If you're brand new to the thing, don't know anything about the hobby, I feel it's probably fairly unlikely that you're going to be giving them extra money to see battle reports and that.
Well, so exactly.
I would suspect the people who are going to watch it are people who are already fairly invested in the hobby, and they've done that with the painting masterclass of like super high level. Not that I've watched it yet because I don't need to know how to paint pale skin, but. That didn't feel like it. That felt like something they would stick up when they've got a new edition of the game.
Yeah, I think so, and I think because of that, there's no interest to me into watching them. So I know that they said that they were going to do like thematic battles, and maybe that would be interesting. But I think like maybe it needs to be like thematic, sure. But like hardcore, like they're doing that thing on their website now, like the Meta Watch, right, where they're getting top players. On their show, on the community site. So why not invite some of the top players? Because I don't want to. I don't know the other guy's name, but I don't want to be harsh to that Nick guy because he does a very good job at presenting, and I'm sure he's good. But like, is he placing at top places at tournaments? Because if he's not, then why aren't they like reaching out to the community?
Maybe what we want out of battle reports isn't what everybody wants.
Yeah. Maybe I'm putting tinfoil hat on. I could imagine them saying, look, we want you to play a game, make it nice and balanced, fairly fluffy. Don't go in there to win. Go in there to have a good old wholesome time. We're going to use power level
for the channel. Then you've got to literally show everything we want to encapsulate for what Warhammer is to someone who's watching it for the first time, because this is kind of our banner.
But that's the thing, no one... Because I said that last night, I purposely put the Blood Angel show on in the living room TV, with all the hassle that it was, so that I can try and sort of gently introduce my wife to, like, hey, this is Blood Angels, and this is actually what I do. Every evening that I disappear from my family, this is what I do. And someone said in the comments of my video, but that'll never happen, right? Because, like, a non-Warhammer player is never going to subscribe to Warhammer Plus. Yeah. So by the same method of, it's
fair point.
A non-Warhammer player is very unlikely to be watching these battle reports. I guess it's just our 2 cents, though.
Yeah, we talked a lot about Warhammer Plus, but there's one more thing I want to say before we move on from this, because I'm a huge, huge fan of James' Workshop. I think he's the best thing Games Workshop have done in
Why
years.
isn't he on it from the start?
So I follow the guy on Twitter, and there was a post about how if he was involved with filming a load of stuff for Warhammer Plus, he wouldn't be allowed to say about it because he would have signed NDAs and all this sort of thing. So that's got me on tenterhooks. I'm interested.
That could be good, yeah. So we need to move on because we're spending all our time whinging about terrible Games Workshop properties. John, I know you and I have been buying things as well. Do you want to tell us about it?
I haven't had a chance to play this. I believe it came out during lockdown, right? But you've played it, or it came out right before lockdown, maybe?
I think it came out sometime, but I know I saw it in the shop, and then I looked at all the miniatures and thought, I'm going to buy this game.
Sure, I guess...
asked my wife, can I buy this game?
What is this game?
I guess the lockdown was a little bit different between Scotland and England. Anyway, this game is Aliens, and Another Glorious Day in the Core. It's a cooperative survival game, and basically, I believe you're reliving the various missions from the Aliens movie that we all know and love and has the best one-liners of just about any movie. Well, I mean, a lot of 80s movies had good one-liners, but Aliens had some of the best. And you are the characters from the movie, Dwayne, Hicks, Hudson, Gorman, Vasquez, Frosty, Ripley, and Newt. And in the base game, you get 16 alien models. And all the art from the rulebook is very much... I'll showcase some of this up on screen right now. It's very much based on the movie.
A lot of screenshots, isn't it?
So is this like a board game or a miniatures game like Warhammer or something else entirely? Because this has bypassed me completely. I hadn't heard of this until you guys mentioned it.
This is it's a miniatures game, but it's not like a war game. It's a miniatures game, but not a miniatures war game. It's cooperative initially, but with the expansion packs, you can actually play as the aliens. But really, what it's all about is I have built all the models, and I think John's going to stick some of them up in editing. Of course, they're green, and I'm using a green screen.
Oh, is that why it's all looking? Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
It is quite nice. But it's like a cooperative thing. So you work through, there's only 3 scenarios in the base game, and it kind of takes you through the story and then the expansions. I bought one of them, which was...
Get away from me, you bitch, right?
Get away from me, you B asterisk branch. And the only reason I bought this was the fact that you got, and you're not going to be able to see this, but again, it'll be up on the thingy, you get a power loader.
Yeah.
And who doesn't want a power loader? And the Alien Queen models, which are
that looks
so cool. Now,
have you painted them then, or are they still...
If you painted them, they wouldn't be screwy and weird all over the green.
Oh, that's true,
yeah. I know, but I've been painting this annoying thing. It's a supremacy armor thing again. So...
I hope your customer who's commissioned that isn't watching. Or is it for you?
Oh, he almost certainly won't. Almost. But anyway, yes, so it's a miniatures game. It's cooperative. You work together to escape the aliens. What's really clever about it is it's got a deck that you exhaust cards, which means you're running on time limit. If you take too much time, you start to waste them, and you can't get those back. If one of your guys gets knocked out, they'll actually get dragged away, and you can play an additional mission to try and rescue them before they get face-hugged, which is pretty cool. Aliens are really powerful. Models are really, really detailed. But I will say they are terrible to build. The actual alien models themselves made me want to tear my own eyes out, because for some insane reason, what they've actually done is they've molded the feet of the alien onto the base, and then the legs are just pointy, and you have to like balance them on the base and like hold them up while the glue dries, or they just like sag. So
horrible.
Where they've decided to cut the models is really quite terrible, because I mean it's Gale Force 9, and I know they make a lot of so I play a bit of D&D and things like that. They make a lot of the nicer D&D models, but yeah, they've cut the models in some really bizarre places, which is a little bit annoying. Because the other thing that I have bought though, which doesn't have that problem, is the asset pack, and that's because you get like a big pile of these like little 80s computers and a couple of tiny auto sentry turrets.
Oh, I love those sentry turrets in the movie.
So out of
They're
curiosity,
so cool. I'm going to use them for like whatever RPG I'm playing, and a tiny face hugger.
how much is the main box, and how many aliens do you get in it?
Quid.
How many aliens do you get
I
in
think
that?
it was $39.99, right?
Yeah, it wasn't expensive. I think you get 16 aliens in the main box, and then 6 heroes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the expansion that I bought was about 20 quid or something, 25 quid. I think it might be a little bit more than that. The assets with the little tiny computers and that was only about a tenner.
Okay.
And I'm glad I bought that. I might buy a second one just because they're so cool. Uses scatter terrain.
Yeah, I mean,
you get loads of these like little Wayland Yutani crates and things like that as well, which would be cool for 40k. The scale's not quite the same.
A mate of mine's a Tyranid player, and he tries to convert all of his Tyranid warriors to be aliens looking with really long heads and stuff, and he's done a really good paint job on them all, so it just sounds curious.
The scale's not quite the same.
Okay.
They look about as if they're sort of almost like 25 mil, and they're not heroic. So they don't look, but they get some alien eggs and stuff like that, which will work quite well, but they're just slightly off scale. And you get a big bag of alien heads spare as well, which are now going to be for basing.
that's cool. That's cool.
Various 40k things.
I was going to say, this was actually my favorite movie of all time, Aliens.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. I've seen it more times than I care to admit. I'm waiting for the 4K re-release, because they did a 4K re-release of the first Aliens movie recently, which was really good.
I'm a huge Alien nerd.
I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say it was one of my favourite films of all time.
That's my era of movies. That
exactly.
was the greatest of movies. You know, you had Aliens around then. You had Blade Runner around then. You had
first
a few of the 80s Arnold Schwarzenegger films, which are all awesome.
Yeah.
It was a time of great movie making.
Absolutely. Before Fast and the Furious and Family.
Oh God, yeah. that's a series of movies. That is.
Anyway, moving.
It's fun though.
Yeah, it is fun. I heard they went to space in the new one. I've not seen it yet. So, so Glorious Pile of Shame. Every week we will talk about
car into space.
Whatever.
It's horrible.
Bollocks
Anyway,
we've spent
different
too much
things.
money on, or Mark hasn't.
I was going to say, one of the future episodes of this series, we will definitely look at Star Wars Legion. Do either of you guys play Star Wars Legion? Have you ever checked that out?
No.
So basically, when I picked it up, my wife said to me, "Is that Star Wars Warhammer?" And I just said, "Yes, love, that's what it is."
And she went away and banged her head against the wall and despaired forever.
Probably. I think later in the evening, I had Darth Vader in my hand, and I was going like, whatever he does, force choke or something.
I was very tempted by Star Wars Legion, but I managed to resist it because being a new game, I didn't know many people who were playing it, and I really only want to drop money on stuff that I know I'm going to get use out of these days.
Sure.
So that's kind of why I stayed away from Star Wars Legion.
Sure. Okay.
I buy things just for the models.
We'll talk about it one week, but let's move on then to part 3. I think, unless there's anything else you want to add.
Grots go deep.
Oh yeah,
Grots go deep.
Deep. Yeah. How creepy can we make the word deep? Go deep. Quite
Is that
creepy.
right? I don't know.
Okay.
That was quite disturbing. A lot of mouth noise, I think. Let's have a screen wipe, John.
All right, intro part 3 whenever you're ready, and maybe just tie it back to part 1 a little bit. Say like, so we're gonna now, and then what am I gonna do? I'm gonna quickly run over the list and see why.
Talk over your list. Talk over why you've picked the different parts of it. And then a couple of things like we said about secondaries. What sort of secondaries is this built for? How are you going to deny secondaries? Why have you gone with is it Patrol Vanguard still?
Yeah, and then I guess you guys can jump in and analyze or break it down however you want, or ask some questions, and then we'll move on. Cool. All right, go for it. Whenever you're ready, Tony.
Okay, so we are back for part 3, and this is the time when we go deep. How often can we say that before it starts to get really creepy?
That many
say it
times.
quite often.
Just deep. Say it again for me, Mark. Do that whole big deep again.
Go deep with 3 grots in their
That's super.
Vox. 3 grots deep in their Vox, going deep.
You realise in
Right,
our
well, let's
promo
go
art,
deep into John's list now. So in part 1, we talked about how we build. Did you see that segue? It was beautiful, wasn't it? In part 1, we talked about how we build a list. Well, now we thought it'd probably be a good idea to look at some of our lists. So we're going to start off with John's list. John, the Blood Angels Commander. You've made an Ultramarines list.
Well done. Congratulations.
Yeah, I have 100% not made Ultramarines list. So I have a tournament a little bit after you. I think it's 11th of September, so I've got about 2 weeks to get 5 models left painted. This list is a patrol in Vanguard, so we are starting 3 CP down straight away before we spend anything. We've got some extra relics, and we've also got Angel's Exemplar in there, so we're down to 6 once we go through this list. So it's built with the Chapter Master on the bike, which we all know, with the Infernal Pistol, Thunderhammer, Gift of Foresight. I run him with the Adamantium Mantle, giving him a 5+ shrug, and sometimes Angel's Artifice, sometimes Armor Indomitus, just to give him more wounds and make him more survivable. We also have a Sanguinary Priest, who I am running naked now in terms of upgrades, because the upgrades are all crazy expensive. 30 points for a jump pack, 35 points in a CP for Selfless Healer. I'm just staying away from them.
Does that make it easier for him to go deep? Or
yeah, it makes him deep into the ground when he dies, yeah. We got Infiltrators, which I love. Infiltrators. I think they're just a very solid unit. Guerrilla Tactics always provides scoring in 9th edition.
So how does that work, John, before we move on? Because there might be someone who doesn't know what Guerrilla Tactics and Infiltrators does.
Yeah, it's a 1 CP stratagem to remove them from the board at the end of any movement phase and bring them back in the following turn's reinforcement phase. And what this means, I guess, is that if you're doing something like retrieve Octarius data, which you need to do in board quarters, and you need to do it more than 6 inches from another board quarter, normally what that means is no unit can do it in 2 adjacent board quarters in a turn, right? Because you don't have the movement to move across. So this lets you just basically pick the unit up, get it where you need it to be, and then perform your actions. So 1 squad of Phobos makes scoring pretty reliable. I'd argue if you had 2 squads of Phobos in your list, it would be very easy to score something like Engage on All Fronts, something like Retrieve Octarius Data. We are also running a decent amount of jump units. We are Blood Angels. We do very well in close combat. So Sanguinary Guard and Vanguard Veterans. Attack bikes with multi-meltas. They went up in points, but I still think they're valuable. I typically reserve them because they don't survive. I am also not running a priest to heal them, and it's not a max size squad, so it's difficult for me to revive them, so I put them in reserve to guarantee that I can bring in some multi-meltas wherever I need them and get value out of them. I also rely on the Whirlwind because I really like Suppression Fire Stratagem, which is a stratagem that makes enemy units, they can't overwatch, they can't sit to defend, and they fight last in the combat phase. Very good if you know you're going to be charged by some big bad that the enemy may have. Plus it can basically, in some cases, just stop the enemy charging you, period, right? Because if the only target they were going to be able to charge, let's say, is your Sanguinary Guard, and you hit them with Suppression Fire, they're going to have to risk all the attacks on the Sanguinary Guard first. And that, in some cases, that's just not an option for them. The Sanguinary Guard would kill them, right? I also take the Librarian, upgraded to the Chief Librarian with the Psychic Mastery to get +1 on all the Psychic tests. And Null Zone is the main reason to run this guy with a jump pack. Again, if the enemy has some sort of big bad thing that you maybe need to remove an invulnerable save, this is the most reliable way we can do it. And in a recent game, I actually used this to kill Mortarion in turn 1. So, it can be very effective. We also have a Primaris Chaplain on a bike who is basically, I think he's a very points efficient model for 115 points. High movement, high toughness, high wounds, and can be armed with both Mantra of Strength and Benediction of Fury to give him that 4 damage weapon with, I think, 7 attacks if Mantra of Strength goes off. And 6s are going to do mortal wounds as well, probably hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s or 3s. We talked about Blade Guard a little bit in part 1. I like to take them to hold the middle of the board. They're a very, very survivable unit. Almost something that I would transhuman every turn, and if you transhuman them, then you can only wound them on 4s. And combined with their storm shields, I mean, the way you look at that, right, is if they've got a storm shield, which is a 4-up, and a transhuman, which means only wound on a 4-up, any hit rolls are going to be reduced by 25%. So if you get hit 10 times, realistically, you're only going to fail 2.5 saves on something that puts them on their 4-up save, which is pretty good. Company veterans are a very small unit. You can use them to protect characters, I guess, if the enemy have a lot of snipers, or in this case, it's a very cheap 51-point unit, again, to perform actions or hold an objective. We talk sometimes about the rule of 2, which is a Star Wars quote, but it is applicable when we talk about dreadnoughts in lists, in that if you have 1 dreadnought on the table, it might feel underwhelming, it might just get shot off the board in turn 1, whereas if you have 2, then you kind of... you're hedging your bets a little bit. You have more chance for them to do something. And then I run bolter inceptors just because I do not have the points for plasma inceptors. The bolter inceptors obviously are nowhere near as effective as the plasmas, but I don't necessarily prioritize them to kill things. I use them as well as they can perform actions. They can move from board quadrant to board quadrant. They are gravis, so they're generally quite survivable. And they do get 18 shots every turn with strength 5 -1 bolt guns, so they aren't horrendous. And this is the list that I will be taking to the tournament. Maybe change a relic or something, but this is it, and this is kind of my reasoning for picking everything. Sorry.
So what sort of secondaries would you go for, do you think, with this list, or are you still up in the air with that?
Well, retrieve Octarius data is for one that's I think is absolutely easy to do in this list, because I typically don't jump my Sanguinius Guard or my Vanguard veterans too offensively in turn 1. So they're always going to be in a board quadrant. So they can do that turn 1. Turn 2, you'd argue you'd have your infiltrators deployed in another quadrant. So you've done 2 in turn 1 and 2. Turn 3, you could have the veterans come in and do it. And or you could pay 1 CP to bring out your infiltrators with guerrilla tactics. So retrieve Octarius data should be fairly secure. Bear in mind, I'm bringing in an Inceptor squad as well, so there's like 5 ways to score the four quadrants I need for data. And then comes down to Oath of Moment. Like I mentioned, like the Blade Guard are probably going to go middle. If I don't think the map is suitable for going middle, and the Blade Guard can be accompanied by 2 Redemptor Dreadnoughts, so usually getting something in the middle feels pretty safe. We can throw away Oath of Moment and actually go for something like grind them down on the enemy. And then, beyond that, Relentless Assault, sometimes map dependent. If it's a big deployment zone, I think I can throw nice cheap units like my Inceptors, like my company veterans into their deployment zone and feel pretty safe. Then there is obviously ways to do that as well. I think that secondaries are definitely something you should consider when building a list, right? And I think that retrieve Octarius data, for example, and I come back to this one as well. When I was on my 2 big win streaks that I've done on my channel, I always... Hang on,
win streak.
Yeah, win streak, take a drink,
there you
go.
Yeah.
I always took Scramblers, which was basically Octarius data, but you only got 10 points for it, right? And again, Scramblers was a little bit easier to do in that you only had to do the action 3 times, but it's still one that is very, very safe, and I think easily done by Blood Angels.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So you've put this list together. I see you've dropped the Tech Marine. What happened to the Tech Marine? Why we got him? Where's he gone rather than this rubbish naked Sanguinius? Although...
You figure you're getting more benefit from healing infantry than healing and buffing vehicles, I take it then? Ultimately.
I think that the Tech Marine is good, and I think that if you run 2, I think probably 2 pieces of armor. I don't count my Whirlwind as a piece of armor because it's going to be hidden away on an objective at the back of the board. My Tech Marines, if I had a Tech Marine, it's never going to be near it, right? So the way I'm looking at this list is there's 2 pieces of armor, they're Redemptors, and when I had 3 pieces of armor, I think I basically had to drop either the Vanguard veterans or the Blade Guard veterans. As a Blood Angel, I like 2 fast-moving units, and then I think the Blade Guard with the Priest are generally very strong. So it's very difficult, I think, for the enemy to chew through the Blade Guard in a single turn, meaning you will get quite a bit of advantage out of the Priest.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I see you've gone back to your utility librarian again. You
Yeah.
did drop him for a while.
I did drop him for a while, and I think when I dropped him, I didn't quite realise how much value the Null Zone was bringing to my list. And the list win streak, the list I had that did the longest win streak had a librarian with Null Zone in it, and sometimes when you're winning games, you don't always. I always say this, like when you're winning games, you maybe don't analyze. Like you just pat yourself on the back, like well done, Tony, you won again. You go home and you go to sleep. But when you lose a game, you're scratching your head for an hour afterwards, going, "What did I do wrong? What was I missing?" And I think part of the integral part of me winning lots of games was the threat of the jump pack Null Zone. So it was like anywhere you were within a reasonable distance of me, I have a very good chance of turning off your invulnerable save and then hitting you with an absolute boatload of melee attacks. Yeah, it doesn't always work, I think, but I like it a lot. And it's
know what you've done wrong because Reziel tells you as soon as we get back onto the.
Yes, sure. But do you know what's really sad about this is like
even Steel Rain and Adam and everybody else. Yeah, Christ.
Mephiston's only 15 points. More than the librarian, but like Mephiston just isn't competitive, and that's something that actually.
The librarian Dreadnought's only 15 points more, and he is just better. Just a pure coolness value.
Ultimately, Meph doesn't do what this librarian does.
You can't give Meph Null Zone, which would be good if you could, because he hasn't got a invuln.
It would synergize with him so well, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
It would be the perfect spell for him, actually, because he doesn't have an invuln. But yes, it's very sad. I would really like to start including Mephiston on my list again, honestly. I used to include him all the time, but yeah, at the moment we just have our nameless librarian. Maybe we'll name him after you in honour, Librarian Tony.
Seems fair.
Mark, you've made us a crazy list. Let's have a look at that.
I have. It is a list that if I submitted it to Blood Angels Commander's list review would do absolutely poor. It'd get roasted. It would score like 10 points out of 40, the lowest it's ever been scored. So this list, it's technically a competitive list, and I've designed it to take it to a tournament. I have no illusions as to how much it's going to win or lose. If I come out of this with 50% win rate, I'll have considered myself to have done well. That doesn't mean that no thought has gone into it. Every single element of this list has been very carefully considered and weighed up and calculated and put in there with reasons behind it. So to begin with, I've gone with a single battalion because I like CP. I like lots of CP. I like the flexibility they give me. I like the rerolls they give me, the stratagems that they give me access to. I like being able to choose what I buff, what tricks I want to use at any given moment flexibly, rather than be tied into what a list can or can't do as a flat thing from the word get-go. So I'll try and prioritize CP as a general rule, which means one detachment for me. Okay, so the premise for this list is very simple. Scoring. I wanted to test out how well a list could do that gave no shits whatsoever about killing the enemy, about surviving. All this list wants to do is score points, primary and secondary. That is it, nothing else. Everything else is extraneous. So, I've got 3 squads of 2 company veterans in here, and they are designed to engage on all fronts around the board, go places, deploy via reserve, do retrieve Octarius data, do engage on all fronts, do behind enemy lines. Is that the line breaker these days? Yeah. One of those 2.
I think so.
And they'll be scoring stuff, which lends me vulnerable to kill more units than not, but that's the risk I've got to take. I'll have to take that on the chin and deal with it. In order to have 3 units of company veterans and make the most of my elite slots, I need to have a captain in my list. So I have a captain in my list. And the captain is in there, and I upgraded him to Death Company Captain because that gives him a teeny bit more survivability for a little bit more points. And upgrading him to a Chapter Master was completely irrelevant because I didn't have enough relic slots left to give him Angel's Artifice to make him even tougher. So he's a Death Company Captain, and his gimmick is he uses Visage of Death and Rights of War to be obsec and to deny obsec from the opponent, to boost forward 20 inches and to take your objective away. Screw you, you're not holding it anymore, I win. or at least I override you on this objective from basically nowhere, which is a lovely trick that I'll use to score some points, hopefully, which would be nice. The Warlord is a chaplain. He's a jump pack chaplain. He is designed to sit in backfield alongside a Sanguinary Ancient and my Sanguinary Guard blob that I've got in there. And the idea with that is that I can have an incredibly huge threat range using the Sanguinary Ancient with Wrath of Baal for +2 movement. That gives me a 14-inch move threat range on my Sanguinary Guard and the Ancient and the Chaplain. The Chaplain has a thingy Warlord trait that means he can use his litanies on a 2-up rather than a 3-up, or I can use a stratagem for 1 CP rather than 2 CP. It lets me automatically activate a litany if I want to for an extra +2 to charge. So that's 14-inch movement, +2 to charge, re-rolling charges because the Chaplain has got Icon of the Angel. I can hide from really far away on the board and still have a huge threat range for my melee blob squad of death, which should, in theory, give the enemy a little bit of pause as to how far forward they want to push their models to try and take objectives off me, knowing that I can jump out and give them a right good drubbing from basically anywhere on the board, I would hope. So we'll see how that goes. What else have we got in here? So let's get out for the top. We've got a Sanguinary Priest, because Sanguinary Priests are really useful at buffing things and holding objectives. If I've got a resilient block of Blade Guard veterans sitting in the middle of my list, sitting in the middle of my board, then buffing them with the Sanguinary Priest is great. He is buffed with a jump pack and with Selfless Healer, because having the flexibility of the jump pack, being able to move wherever I want him to and buff and help out whichever elements my army need at any given point, I rate really highly. And Selfless Healer just makes it that a little bit more efficient on CP on rezzing models here and there, which will be nice and useful, I hope. Maybe it's an irrelevant thing to have done, I'm not sure, but I'm kind of starting into this build at this point, so we'll stick with that. Troops. So we've got a unit of Infiltrators and 2 squads of Incursors. The Incursors will deploy forward in order to be in movement range of mid-board objectives on the first turn, whether I go first or second. And the Infiltrator squad will stay backfield to sit on objective because their guns synergize more at range than otherwise, and their deployment denial bubble of 12 inches will be quite handy. So that's the troops. Blade Guard are going to sit on objectives and push forward either to mid-board or whatever mid-board objectives, whether they're on either side, they're going to hold them. I've got a squad of 5 Death Company with jump packs, which will deploy as far forward as possible and threaten Forlorn Fury turn 1 with 2 Thunderhammers. And the rest of them a Chainsaw and Bolt Pistol. It's not the strongest punch in the world, but it's a punch, and it might make my opponent think twice about how he deploys to avoid being hit with them in the face. I'm probably not going to do that, but having the option to do it will affect what my opponent does, how they deploy, be a little bit more cagey in it. Generally mess with their game plan a little bit. The Sanguinary Guard are there to threaten killing things. There's a blob of 7 of them, and they have swords, because swords are the best. If you say different, then screw you. I don't care. I love swords. Deal with it. Go fund me an axe if you want to, and I might think about changing it, but I'm absolutely not planning on buying more Sanguinary Guard to equip them with axes or anything like that. Never. What?
Go on, let's get to the elephant in the room. You've got 3 units of company veterans, 3 drop pods.
I haven't got there yet. That's at the end of the list, mate. Come on. So, the Whirlwind does what Whirlwinds do. The Thunderfire Cannon is there to do what Whirlwinds do, but slightly different, because he will slow things down with the Tremor Shells. And yes, there are 3 drop pods and 3 squads of company veterans. And the veterans are equipped as they are, because I had some points left over at the end, and I was going to equip them all with double chain swords, but I figured with my upgrade points left over, I'll give some of them Storm Shields, just to aid in their survivability, because ultimately, the longer they live, the longer they can hold things and threaten things. They're not going to do any real damage, but the opponent's going to have to deal with them, because they're going to be scoring things.
Okay. So secondaries then are Engage, Rod.
So the secondaries are basically fixed. There are 3 out of the 9 missions that can run that have 5 objectives. Every other mission has an even number of objectives. Those 5 objective missions, I'm going to double down on holding the central objective. So I will choose Oaths of Moment and Stranglehold. Oaths of Moment for holding the central point, Stranglehold for holding more objectives than my opponent. And the third objective will vary based on whether it's there's a mission useful objective which involves holding the middle objective, like direct assault or priority targets, or I'll go retrieve Octarius data or something. The list is designed to make use of retrieve Octarius data, so in most of the other missions I'll be choosing that. I will also be choosing probably relentless assault or behind enemy lines, most likely behind enemy lines. And if my opponent has got enough to screen out effectively, such that my drop pods won't deploy or be able to land in their deployment zone, I'll probably choose engage on all fronts instead of behind enemy lines. And the third objective might be Oaths of Moment, might be something like assassinate. I'll essentially play flexible with that one, depending on what the enemy army is and what the terrain is like, what the mission's like. It is designed to do those secondary objectives that I can control through my movement and my actions in my turn, with no impact from the enemy on me scoring those secondaries whatsoever.
Yeah, I was
possibly him screening me out.
going to say this is almost a polar opposite to my list, where my list scores stuff with a bare minimum number of units, but we are very killy, whereas you will score things without necessarily worrying about the killing. Yes. Just in some, so I think it goes both ways. In some games I will lose because I'm too focused on killing and not scoring enough. In some games you will lose because you'll be trying to score and you'll be getting killed, right?
But totally.
It's interesting to see both sides, and these are both Blood Angels lists, and we both basically have the same core of Blade Guard and the Sanguinary Priest, just you've kept the Chief Apothecary and Jump Pack, and I actually don't think that's a bad pick at all. I just think it's super costly, but if you have a clear plan on how you're going to run it, then I think that's fine. The reason I probably dropped it, as I say, was to be more killy, right?
Yeah, it's fair. So game plan wise, I've got my first few turns scripted out. Turn 1, I drop down the first drop pod with a squad of 2 company veterans inside it, ideally in my enemy's deployment zone, otherwise as far forward as I can to score engage and retrieve Octarius data. That's 2 units. That inherently scores behind enemy lines. So if I can fit that pod and it's 2 men inside my enemy's deployment zone, that's 4 secondary points right there. And then my enemy's got to turn around and deal with them.
100%, yeah, and drop pods drop pods are a pain to kill just because they're toughness 6 and 8 wounds, right?
Yeah. So they turn around, they deal with them, they kill them. So I drop another pair down in turn 2. And you've got to turn around and deal with them as well. And they're still going to score me 4 points for engage or behind enemy lines, and the points I'm getting for retrieve Octarius data, so that they kill them as well. Then I do it again in turn 3. Are you getting pissed off yet? I hope you are, because that's kind of the whole point of the list. I've clogged you up and used up your firepower and your attack power, dealing with drop pods and 2 Marines, which will be scoring me points the whole time that you can do nothing about. But if you leave them there, they'll keep scoring, and I can go elsewhere and do other things.
I was going to say, and ideally the Marines are hidden behind the drop pod, if possible, I guess.
Yeah, or if not, then they've got a chainsword or 2 chainswords each, and on a pair of company veterans, that's a lot of shit attacks.
Yeah. I think it's 12 attacks on the 2 of them. They get more attacks than assault intercessors, the company veterans.
Yeah, exactly.
So have you written this list just to be annoying?
Yeah,
was that what you're going with?
Pretty much.
Well, I think it's cool. I've never seen someone use 210 points of drop pods and only put 120 points of
40 points in each. Sorry, 44 points in each pod. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
thereabouts.
I think it's awesome. I love it. It's either going to win spectacularly, even if it just confuses the hell out of everybody who plays against you.
Yeah, and the good thing is this tournament is in a week's time on the 3rd of September, being run by a local gaming group in the Midlands called WS10 or Wet Skill 10, who are a bunch of absolutely amazing blokes. Absolutely top. Thoroughly recommend playing with any of them if you have the chance. And they're running this little 2-day thing, 5 games with sort of local chippy lunch provided in the middle of it, which is great. And I'll go there and I'll take this army, and hopefully it will be fully painted by then. Realistically, it probably won't be, so I'll be down a few points off that, because I doubt I'll have the time and energy to make myself finish painting everything. But it'll be very close. It'll be close. And yeah, it'll play and it'll die, or it won't die, and I won't care. and it'll be a laugh. Ultimately, that's where it all is. I want to see how well this approach works in a game when you get right down to it. I want to see just how legitimate a tactical idea this is.
Well, if you keep some notes, and guess what, guys, come back in a couple of weeks' time, and Mark will give us an update on how his very non-killy Blood Angels list does, and then a few weeks
crying into my glass. Or not,
I was going to say, and a few weeks later, I'll tell you how my opposite army does.
There's almost like an unspoken challenge in that. That was like, so we'll see how your shit army does, and then I'll show you how it's done properly.
There's no challenge there because John's not that competitive, really, is he? I mean,
no,
no, not at all.
No. Cool. But thanks for sharing, and it's nice to see definitely an alternative approach, but one that's definitely thought out, as you said, and one that's going to score points regardless.
Thanks for not utterly roasting it in front of my face. That's appreciated.
And that's the Sunday show, isn't it? This has scored 4 points.
Yeah.
Woo.
All right.
Specialized.
Are we
Horde killing? Armor killing? Nothing. Oh no, we got two. We got two Thunderhammers. That'll do. Yeah.
I was going to say, 2 Thunderhammers.
And a servo harness. Oh god, it's got 5 characters. I didn't realise that Thunderfire Cannon comes with a character, so I thought I only had 4 characters, but it actually has 5 characters.
Yeah, but it can sit out of line of sight, to be fair to it, and it's going to be harder to kill off.
Yeah. You could be smart here, actually, if you use the middle of the table and you have the Whirlwind 1 inch over that side of the table, and you have the Thunderfire 1 inch over that side of the table, and then the Tech Marine hidden. You could repair the Whirlwind, you could repair the Thunderfire, and just sort of get you hold 2 quadrants for engaging all fronts.
Yeah. See how it goes.
Cool. All right, Tony, do you want to tell us about your list next? And this is...
So, I bought that box...
Hexfire.
I thought we're going deep, so I thought I would go
deep.
Full deep. I went heretic. So
never go.
This is a case of me putting a little bit of my money where my mouth is. And I mentioned earlier on when we were talking about how we build lists, how I have the same technique even with anything that I build. So I've got that. I've never played Thousand Suns before, so I don't really know anything about it. And before I go and watch some tier lists, and before I really dig into the meta and say, well, what's the top things, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to spend a bit of time. I'm going to read my codex and I'm going to write a list.
Your psychic phases are going to be an hour long each.
Yeah. Because although I don't know anything really about Thousand Suns, I'm going to read the codex and I'm going to have a pretty good idea, but I'm not going to try and do anything too special. I'm going to stick to my kind of rule of 3. I'm going to stick to making sure I can hit all those different targets, and I'm going to try and build a list. So this is what I've come up with. This is the heretical bastards, I think I called them, but John's gotten rid of that. Or it hasn't come up on the list there.
Sanguinius's Thousand Suns.
Yeah, double traitors.
That's heretical right there.
Love a bit of heresy. Now, so what have I gone for? Now, I'm going to talk you through a little bit because it's a new codex and we haven't had a chance to look at this yet. So I'm going to tell you what the different things do, and I'm going to go through this kind of piece by piece. Now, we've started off with our Warlord, and I've gone for Ahriman. Now, Ahriman is actually pretty awesome. I've just finished reading the book, and I'm not going to lie, that's mainly why I brought him, or one of the books. He really is an awesome character, but actually he's pretty powerful. Now, he's a little bit more expensive than I normally like to spend on a character, but I think he's probably worth it. You can re-roll all of his psychic tests. You can always re-roll. He's fast because I've given him that little upgrade to put him on the disc so he can zip around everywhere. His traits...
character an upgrade?
You can. It's the only one I've noticed that you can actually do this. But you can. You get the option of giving him his... disc or not his disc.
Fair enough.
So, Warlord trait, I've gone with this guy, and I've gone with Otherworldly Presence, and this is just a nice once per game 3+ invuln save, which will come in handy because I don't want...
Again, you've got a choice on Warlord trait with him.
No, it's the one he comes with if you want.
Okay, right, fair enough.
So he's got the 3+ invuln save, which is very nice. But what we do get to pick is his psychic powers. Now, I've gone with the Cult of Time, which means that all of my models have got the Cult of Time power, which is actually a really, really useful. Now, we've talked about sanguinary priests and how useful they are. So listen to this. Cult of Time, Psychic Power, Time Flux, Warp Charge of 6. We've got all sorts of shenanigans so we can cast things really easily. If manifested, select one friendly Cult of Time infantry unit, which is all of my units, more or less. Within 6, you can return one destroyed model from that unit to the battlefield with all its wounds back.
Nice.
So it's basically, I can res someone for a psychic test. Now, all of my psychers have this, and almost every unit in my army is a psyker, which means that unlike sanguinary priest that I've got to move around, I can pretty much cast this where I want. Now, I've picked out a couple of different powers for him. I've gone with Doombolt, which is a nice flat 3 mortal wounds, which is lovely. I've gone with Zinch's Firestorm because I couldn't think of anything else to give, which is just another mortal wound Witchfire. But the one that I'm feeling really sneaky about is Temporal Surge, because Temporal Surge, when I can find it, here it is. Warp Charge of 7. Remember, I can reroll and I've got a million bonuses to it. This unit can make a normal move. Well, I put him on his disc. So that means that I can zip him forward in the movement phase, blow something up with a big pile of Witchfires and Smites, and then I can move him back again out of sign of sight.
How many psychic powers can you cast?
Quite a lot. So, Ahriman can manifest 3 psychic powers.
Of course you can.
So I can jump forward, I can smite you, I can doombolt you, and I can run away. And then we've got something called Cabal points, which I'm not going to get into, but it basically means that I can spend some Cabal points. I've got a lot of them to give him the ability to cast an extra power this turn if I want to cast 4 powers.
Nice.
And I'm going to come to why I've loaded him up with a load of Witchfires and sneaky jump back in a little bit. So what else have I gone for? I've gone with an Exalted Sorcerer because it's a Zinch army and it's a core model and it flies around on a disc. And I've given him Temporal Manipulation, which is the nice little power, which can... Hang on, I'll get to it. I'm running around like a lunatic. Temporal Manipulation, which will, if I can find it, here we go. Yeah, basically, it's almost the same as the other power that we just talked about, except that this one heals someone within 12 inches and only with D3 wounds. So I'm bringing back 2 models a turn.
Is that healing or reviving as well? That one's reviving as well?
It just heals it, but
okay.
It still allows me to heal something up. So I've gone with that. I've put him on a disc as well so he can zip around. And I've given him a relic, which is on there somewhere, the Hourglass of Manat. This is one of those ones that really annoys people because it is one which allows you... Now, this is back to my Cult of Time thing here. My Cult of Time special relic, I think. Yep. If he dies, he comes back to life with D3 wounds.
Guaranteed or on a 4-up or anything? No, just guaranteed.
Set the bearer back up again as close as possible to previous position, more than 1 inch away from enemy models with D3 wounds remaining.
Do you know that's a really good ability to have to counter someone else's assassinate pick. You know that?
Yeah. There's a bit of a theme with that here. So let's move on. We've got the Infernal Master. That's the new kind of chaplain that they get. But it's like a chaplain that's also a librarian because it's got psychic powers as well. Now, I've given him some stuff. I've given him some Infernal Pacts. I've given him Glimpse of Eternity, which means I've got a reroll. If I get that off, it works like a chaplain, so 3+ to get it off. And it gives me a reroll, but it's 1 reroll dice. Any reroll dice. It's got nothing to do with the mission. So I can't reroll a mission objective kind of action, but I can reroll 1 of the charge dice or 1 dice in, well, anywhere really.
Cool.
Which is a nice little thing. What was the other one I gave him? I gave him something else. Oh, Malefic Maelstrom, which is 1 unit within 12, adds 1 to their damage, adds 1 to their strength, which is a nice little one. Then I've given him a relic, which is a bit of a cheeky one. Once per turn, the first time a saving throw is failed for this bearer, damage characteristic is changed to 0. And then I doubled down on that. You might be seeing a theme here. I've doubled down on that, and I've given him a Warlord trait. So I've paid a CP for this one, which was somewhere, if I can find it, Undying Form. Which is another horrible thing, because what Undying Form does is it will reduce the amount of damage that he's taking by 1.
You know what all of this is making me think? It's
What?
making me think that when Eldar Craftwell come out, they're
Yep.
going to be fucking... Oh, God. Wouldn't want to play Thousand Suns versus Eldar, because that'll just go on forever.
Yeah. Because the amount of different upgrades I've put. So what I've got here is I've got basically a chaplain, maybe not quite as good in combat, that reduces all incoming damage by 1 and ignores the first time you damage him per turn.
These powers all sound like the sort of stuff you'd expect a Farseer to have as well.
They're all pretty good, aren't they? This was a bit complicated, this bit, but it gets a bit simpler now. So what I've gone straight into is a squad of Rubric Marines. They are just a basic troops choice. I very carefully look at the number of those there. That's right. 9.
8.
No, 9.
7.
9, including the sorcerer, yeah.
You sure it's not 10?
No. Do you know why I've not gone for 10?
No.
Because the number of Zinch is 9.
Oh, right.
I get absolutely no benefits from this. In fact, it's worse in almost every way than taking 10. But I reckon if I take 9, then I'll get bonus points.
You never
so
come
it's
across
not the most
Nurgle players trying to always take units of 7 or anything like that,
They're
John?
supposed to. They used to have to, but these days you don't have to. But I want to bring that back. You know, Nurgle should be 7, Khorne should be 8, Zinch should be 9, and nobody cares what Slanesh is because they're all
really fast. In charge from the other side of the board.
heretical.
Okay.
So I brought a load of rubrics. I think I've got, how many squads of those have I got? 1,
3.
2. I think I've
So,
got 3 squads of rubrics.
27 rubrics.
I brought 27 rubrics. Rubrics are nice because I've got the all is dust, which means that anything with a damage characteristic of 1, I get an extra bonus to my armor save. So I'm armor saving on 2+.
Does that stack with cover then? Sorry.
Yeah.
Will it? So if you were in cover, you're on a 1-up save if it against 1 damage. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
That's right. Because
Gets better when we look at the Scarab Occult Terminators.
Cool. All right. Sorry, rubrics.
Yeah. Rubrics. I've stuck a Soul Reaper Cannon in there because the Soul Reaper Cannon is awesome. It's what our assault cannons and everything should be. Heavy 5, strength 6, AP -3, damage 1.
Is that the little
We don't care
Gatling
about-
cannon looking gun thing?
It's the Gatling cannon kind of thing. So
Okay.
I've just stuck one of those in each squad. And then naturally, because this is Thousand Suns, it's got its own powers. I've gone with Empiric Guidance, but of course they still have that thing where they can res somebody and smite, or smite. And I went with Empiric Guidance because Empiric Guidance means that I only got a warp charge of 4, easy to get off. 1 unit within 12, add 6 inches to the range of all heavy and rapid fire weapons.
Nice.
And their bolters are nasty. If you've not looked, the bolters that they get infernal bolters, which
They're additional
are
-1
AP
AP, aren't they? Yeah.
AP -2.
Yeah.
I wonder if
They're
they
kind of
can damned back. That would be cool.
So that's 30-inch AP -2
bolters.
bolters.
And here's a question, because I haven't seen the new Thousand Sun Codex. Do they still have like their version of bolter discipline? In the Nurgle Codex, it was called like malicious volleys or something, right?
Yeah, I think they do. I can't remember what it's called in here. It's in here somewhere.
In there.
But anyway, we'll move on because we're going to be here all night.
Mhm.
I've got a unit of Zangors. There are 10 of those. And I apologise unreservedly for that. The reason is that you can't take any less than 10,
Oh, really? Okay.
which just seems wrong for basically Cinch Demons.
Isn't there a rule to take under strength units these days?
Yeah, but I ain't going to do that. The benefit of going for the battalion was I only actually spent the 2 CP for extra powers.
Right.
Zangors, they're just shitty melee units. I've not done anything with them. I've not given them guns because they're better off without them, and they're just there to do an action or die.
Seems fair.
I don't care about those. Scarab Occult Terminators, they're Terminators, but they've got all this dust, so they're all sitting, if they're in cover, on a 0+ armor save.
Nice.
Against damage 1 weapons. The only downside to the Scarab Occults is they don't get power fists. They've got the Prospero Kapesh, which is just basically a power sword, AP -3, damage 2 power swords.
And
I would
strength,
rather
what, are they
have
hitting, what strength are they hitting with? 4 or 5?
+1. So hitting a strength 5. It's all right. They're not bad. Something I should have mentioned is all of these troops units have OBSEC.
As
Well, the troops have
troops, they
offset.
would
Yeah,
do,
But so do the occult terminators.
Oh, curious.
In fact, almost everything in this army has got obsec, apart from the characters and the heavy support.
What's giving the Terminators obsec? Sorry.
They just get it.
Oh, they just get it. Okay.
They just get it. Which is brutal. So I've got a couple of units of these Scarab Occult Terminators. I can plonk them down an objective. I can obsec it. They're big units. They're hard to kill with all his dust.
The deep strike.
The Hellfire Missile Rack.
Teleport strike, yeah.
Yeah. The Hellfire Missile Rack is actually a weapon that I would bother taking. It's strength 8, AP -2, damage D3, but it's fairly cheap. And we've got a Soul Reaper cannon again, which I've just said how good they are. And then I thought, well, I need something that I can be dealing with my big stuff. So I've brought a couple of indicators.
You love indicators, don't you?
Can't go wrong. Siege shields,
Okay.
2+ armor save, toughness 8, nice and cheap. A Mutilith Vortex Beast, which is really weird and complicated, but a wicked model. It's got some good melee ability. Hits on strength 8, flat 3 damage in melee, or it can do a lighter attack that's got double attacks. Sorry, 3 times the number of attacks, and it's got 5 attacks base anyway. And then it's got some complicated beams of unreality to do mortal wounds against tanks and stuff. So I've really got those 3 for dealing. Talk about the rule of 3. I've got those 3 for dealing with my tanks. I've got a Zangor Shaman because I had the model. Came in that Hexfire box, which is just another Psyker. I've got 4. I've got 4 powerful characters here. Well, 3 powerful characters and 1 shit one. But that's right on the verge of Assassinate. And I kind of wanted that because now you're on a thing of, if I had 5 characters, they're definitely going to take Assassinate, but they might take Assassinate with 4 because that Zangor's pretty easy to kill, but the other 3 aren't though.
Can I ask a question?
Go on, Ed.
What's the secondary for killing Psychers? Because that's going to be interesting here. Because every squad,
the witch.
yeah, Abhor the Witch.
You can't have your own Psyker if you take it.
Oh, that's true though. But I guess against some armies, that's going to be a pretty strong pick against this, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Now
will have it. Admech will have it. Yeah.
I haven't
Jafari will
really
have it.
built this with loads of stuff for objectives in mind, but what I have done is because we've got a couple of special ones here, and there's a couple that really jump out to me. One is if they bring a load of Psychers themselves, I can use Sorcerer's Prowess, score 5 victory points at the end of the battle for each enemy Psychic character unit that was killed in the Psychic phase. I've got a shit ton of Witchfire.
Okay.
So if they've gone, especially when you think about Grey Knights, everybody's a Psyker, or Eldar. Could be a pretty easy max out.
Yep.
So just melt a couple of Warlocks.
Fair enough.
The one that I really like is Wrath of Magnus, which is great if, like, for example, against John's list. Now, John's got 1 Psyker. And the rules here, you can only select this objective if your opponent has 1 or more Psykers. Well, we got that. Score 3 victory points at the end of the battle round if more enemy models than friendly models were destroyed this battle round as a result of psychic powers.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's going to be near impossible to fail, especially if your enemy's only psychic power is a smite or something.
Exactly. So I should be able to spam those and be getting sort of 12. I don't think I'm that likely to get 15, but
it feels like a solid 12. Yeah, you could even leave. Could even leave
9 or
models
12.
on a few mortal wounds.
So I've basically, with this list, I don't know what I'm doing, and that's what I'm trying to get across. I've bought the book, but I've based it around that same sort of core idea. I don't know what I'm doing, so I've got a big, strong core of resilient infantry to do loads of actions. There's a few interesting ones in here. I've got loads of mortal wounds, so I can deal with characters or complicated things. I've got a bit of anti-tank and a couple of indicators. Remember, I've got that power, so I can re-roll 1 dice, which could be a damage roll. And then I can just CP another one. I've got loads of CP to play with for that. I've got loads of ways of healing. So I'm sure all the Thousand Suns players out there are screaming how unoptimal this list is. But I've followed that rule. I've got 3 ways at least of dealing with everything that I can play against.
Well, and I think that's great that you came back to your core principles that you mentioned in the first part in this list. And yeah, I mean, if people aren't familiar or if people are new and need to work out how to build a list for a first time, then I think what you said has quite a lot of value here, Tony. Mark, is there anything you want to say about this list?
I'm trying to work out what I want to do about it, to be honest, if I was facing it. I think that I would want to exploit your relative lack of movement and speed.
Yeah.
Your characters have it, but if they're zipping around and your troops are behind, then that makes your characters easy to pick off. So you're probably not going to be able to make the most of your character's mobility as you'd like to. Your Vindicators are a problem. Dealing with a couple of Vindicators could be an issue. If I see a Mutileth Vortex Beast on the board, I'm going to wonder, what the fuck does that thing do? I've got no idea. It's a crazy...
It's bonkers model. It's so cool.
Yeah, it was an AOS monster that they gave 40k rules to for no readily apparent reason. Well, probably to sell more models, I suppose. Your Terminators are going to be a bit of a bugger. The Rubrics are going to be a bit of a bugger.
One thing I can do, and I should have mentioned, 2 CP to start the game. Or it's actually going to be a bit more because it's a bit of a larger... I can set up a couple of units in the midfield.
It looks like a sort of just as slow, but trading in the resilience for psychic power version of Death Guard, I think, really. It's
not quite as resilient, but it's got a lot of psychic power.
Yeah.
And it's got a lot of trickery, so there's ways you can teleport units around. Of course, my Terminators can teleport anyway. Once we're down, we have to rely on that. And I've not taken... There are a couple of psychic powers which will teleport a unit, and I've not taken those.
I assume each power can only be used once per psychic phase.
Yeah, which is why I've had to sort of spread them around a little bit.
Yeah.
Question.
But, yeah?
And it's probably because you're new to Suns. Was there a reason that you decided not to include Magnus?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that I don't like big point sync models.
That's fair enough.
Magnus is 450 points of big, red, and awesome, but he's 450 points. He'd have been a quarter of my army, and I was umming and ahhing, to be honest, about Ahriman because he's so many points, and he's only 180 points. Magnus is great, but he's so big you can't really hide him. So he's going to get an awful lot of incoming flak. He's not Mortarian. He's not nearly as tough as him. I mean, I'll grab the thing up, and I'm sure, John, you can stick his data sheet up because I think it's the sort of thing that people are going to be interested in, really, isn't it? And looking at Magnus in the book, he's got a couple of psychic powers, so he's got he can take the 3+ invuln for a turn. I think he's got the -1 damage on him. But at the end of the day, he's an 18 wound, toughness 7 guy with a 4+ invuln.
So Mortarian's shtick is not that he's really killy, he's a real bugger to kill.
Yeah.
What would Magnus bring to your army if you brought him?
He has every psychic power and will cast them almost definitely. If he casts them at higher levels, so for example, his smite is mental. Each time the model manifests a smite psychic power, inflict D6 mortal wounds instead of D3, or 3D3 on a super smite.
How many different powers does he have access to when you say he's got access to all of them?
Hang on, it's one of those I'd have to work it out.
If he's like Teclis and Age of Sigmar, he's got potential access to 18 psychic powers
10, 11, 12,
spells.
13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 of them.
You ain't going to learn all of them.
He's got so much thing. I've also quite like the fact that
remembering all the stratagems he got access to, let alone all the psychic powers as well. Bloody
hell. Hang on. Oh yeah, no, he has, because he has to. It's a bit of a funny one. He only has them if you take his warlord traits, basically.
Fair enough.
It's a bit like he's got loads of warlord traits, like Morty does.
I was going to say, does he not have to be your warlord though in a Supreme Command detachment if you include him in your list though?
There isn't any rule that actually says that.
Oh really?
Oh, hang on.
Has he got Supreme Command?
Yeah, he does. I'm talking rubbish.
Yes,
Demon Primarch. If your army is battle forged, this model must be your army's warlord.
Okay.
Yeah, because he's not giving time over to anyone else.
Yeah. Now he does add a lot of the Cabal points that I talked about earlier. Cabal points are great because they allow you to, after you've rolled, add, for example, a point to the score for the psychic test.
This game's getting really complex these days.
Or a couple of points. This will take ages to play.
Yeah. Plus,
But yeah, he's pretty brutal, but he's too many points, basically.
I was going to say your denies against this list are going to have to be so well thought out because, like,
and you know, on the other hand, every squad in this army has got a deny.
yeah.
And
So
some of them have multiple.
yeah, is there any just off topic? Is there any things in that book that gives you more advantage to your denies as well, or is it mainly just offensive?
No, when they brought them out, because I did buy the Grey Knights Codex as well. Basically, what they did was 1,000 Suns get +1 to cast, Grey Knights get +1 to deny.
Okay. All right. Cool. So thank you for sharing list, especially because you've had to make this from scratch. Maybe at some point we'll see it out and about, and you can let us know how you do with it. Is this what you're painting at the moment then?
Well, I've bought some of the models out of it, but I would like to build it if I ever got time and finish my Blood Angels, but as things are.
Finish an army. Finish an
That's not
army.
going to happen, is it? I've still got about 30 dreadnoughts. I also thought I'm going to back an army list without any dreadnoughts in it.
Wow, that's a first for you then. Okay, and do you want to tell us about the wonderful graphic that we've got before we sign off for the end of the first episode?
Well, I can do. So this is a sketch. It was done by someone called Bethany Irving. She is an artist, and she sketched it out for us on a whim on a sketchy bit of paper.
I love it. I think it's awesome.
My favourite thing is the back nipples. They are fantastic. And anyway, so we got the sketch, and then I coloured it in basically with inks because I thought it needed it. It was a little bit boring before. So yeah, that is the sketch. You can guess who is who on that sketch.
And if you can't guess, ask in the comments, and
And if you can zoom in, you will find that actually the book at Mephiston Grots' feet has got the first line of a book. So someone might be able to get that from that low-res image there, and you can stick it in the comments, and I will give you a virtual high five if you can guess what the first line of that book is.
I need to finish painting my Sanguinius at some point. I need to finish painting a lot of things at some point.
Yeah, that is the problem. So, thank you so much for all your hard work that went into the episode, guys. Thank you to anyone that watched us. I hope that you will consider watching us again in the future, and if so, then you definitely want to hit the subscribe button below the channel. Not 100% sure when we'll be back next, but we will be back, and thank you ever so much for watching.
We'll definitely be back, unless you write in the comments that you hate us and you never want to see us again, and then we'll be back just to spite you.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the comments, remember, tell us what we did shit. Tell us what we did not so shit, or just hurl abuse at Mark. No, don't do that. That's not fair.
Hurl abuse at me. I don't know. I can take it. If you hate swords, then bring it. If you think axes for the win, bring it. Come on. Yeah.
Yeah, and now there's nothing else to do but to cue our music.
Cue the music.
Ooh.
Scream wipe.
We've finished going deep. Yeah. Music.